Hello YouTube, and welcome to my channel. This video is the start of a new series about current events and news in the Catholic Church. It's called Effing the Ineffable, because the main focus of the channel is going to be pointing out the effed up things people say about the Church and correcting them for the benefit of Catholics and non-Catholics alike. So our first article comes from the National Catholic Reporter. Now for those who might be confused by the name, NCR is actually not a Catholic organization. In fact, in 1968, then Bishop of Kansas City, His Excellency Bishop Helmsing, told NCR to drop the name Catholic from their publication, and they refused. This directive was reaffirmed again in 2013 by His Excellency Bishop Finn, Helmsing's successor, when he said he has the duty to call the media to fidelity, citing the Code of Canon Law, which calls for a just penalty for anyone who excites hatred of or contempt for religion or the Church. In response, the editors of the newspaper said, "Oh, we're not Catholic just because we call ourselves the National Catholic Reporter. We're an independent newspaper that comments on Catholic things." So that should give you an idea of where they're coming from. The article is called America First Agenda, a disgrace to Jesus First Discipleship, which was written by a Mr. John Gehring. John Gehring is the Catholic Program Director at Faith in Public Life, the author of The Francis Effect, a radical pope's challenge to the American Catholic Church, and a self-identified Catholic progressive. His article opens by saying, "The ability to distinguish between conscientious patriotism that thinks critically about citizenship and the perils of blind nationalism are themes always worth exploring. As we pause to celebrate Independence Day, this theme is ripe for deeper reflection among those of us who are religious." Now this is a great point. All citizens, but especially Christians, do have a responsibility to examine the moral dimensions of citizenship. Now let's see how he F's it up. White Christians, in particular, are long overdue for some soul-searching about their role in giving moral cover to an America First agenda that is anathema to a Jesus First discipleship. And so it only took us 3 sentences to learn that again, white people are the problem. He continues, "The reality is that the Trump administration would not have the audacity and moral blindness to view the world in these terms, except for the fact that the president is emboldened by the more than 80% of white evangelicals and more than half of white Catholics who put him in power." Well, imagine my shock to learn that a progressive writing for a progressive paper feels the need to blame white people. But I wonder if Mr. Gehring also holds the 90+% of black voters responsible for the immoral and cruel Obama-era policies, including abortion and drone strikes in the Middle East. No? Well, I'm sure he's working on that article as we speak. But let's leave Gehring's racist hypocrisy aside for now. He continues by writing, "Christian nationalism asks us to bend a knee to an idol and twist sacred words for profane purposes. When the flag and the cross are inseparable, we expect the divine to conform to our images rather than seeking the image of the divine in ourselves. That is dangerous, soul-killing business." Again, I generally agree with his point. There should be some separation between religion and politics, or else politics becomes a kind of idol. I'm glad Gehring and I can agree on that point, which is why I was so surprised to find this article in Sojourners. Apparently, on March 1st, Mr. Gehring was arrested for saying the Rosary in the rotunda of the Russell Senate office building in D.C. Earlier this week, I participated in civil disobedience for the first time. 40 Catholic sisters, priests, and other lay advocates were arrested in the rotunda of this Russell Senate office building in solidarity with the young undocumented dreamers. Standing in a circle, we prayed the Rosary in unison. Capitol Police warned us to disperse 3 times. We continued our Hail Marys as police slowly let us out. Now, not to put too fine a point on it, but let's look at the photo accompanying the article. The only person of color in the image is one of the officers arresting the protesters. Mr. Gehring, why are your protests so white? But moving on to the important part of the article, to make a confession, I haven't said the Rosary in a few years. Of course. But praying it in communion with so many Catholics putting their faith into action reminded me of a section from Mary's prayer, the Magnificat. "He has shown the strength of his arm. He has scattered the proud in their conceit. He has cast down the mighty from their thrones and has lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent away empty." Faith is radical and subversive. When we confront injustice and follow the gospel, we disrupt the usual order of business. Prayer alone isn't enough, but prayer with action inspires hope and creates change. Christians should never underestimate that power. That's a really powerful statement coming from the guy who just 4 months later would say, Christian nationalism asks us to bend a knee to an idol and twist sacred words for profane purposes. But you know what? Let's not be cynical. Maybe it's a good thing if progressive activism has led Mr. Gehring to a new spiritual devotion to Our Lady. I'm sure he would feel that prayerful advocacy in the public square is a good thing. That is, unless less than a year earlier he wrote another article criticizing people for doing exactly that. But I mean, what's the likelihood of that? Oh. Last week I coughed up the hefty registration fee to listen to how an influential segment of Catholics and other religious conservatives are organizing in the Trump era. The gathering mixed traditional Catholic religious practices with moments that felt uncomfortably nationalistic. For instance, the gathering opened with a patriotic rosary for the consecration of our nation. So, let me get this straight. When conservatives pray a rosary in 2017 asking for God's blessing on our nation, it's disturbing and uncomfortably nationalistic. But when you pray a rosary in 2018 to protest the deportation of illegal immigrants, it's radical and subversive. Now, Gehring complains that conservative Catholics risk being relegated to cheerleaders for the administration if they downplay or ignore how poverty, the environment, and the command to welcome migrants are central to traditional church teachings. But the reality is that conservative Catholics remain more likely to criticize the Trump presidency on issues like immigration than liberal Catholics ever were for the Obama presidency on the much more grave issues of abortion and gay marriage. In fact, in that same article, Gehring says that His Excellency Archbishop Gomez criticized the Trump administration on immigration in that very meeting. So, Mr. Gehring, I don't disagree with your main points. Yes, religion and religious people must be advocates for justice in the public square. And yes, in fulfilling this role, we should remember that expediency in politics should never trump our commitments to our faith. What I do disagree with is your hypocrisy in accusing your political opponents of recruiting God into endorsing their politics when that's literally all you do. So if you want to criticize those who would twist sacred words for their politics, start by looking in the mirror. And if you would like to continue your dedication to your once-a-year rosary, might I recommend doing so by making an appearance at the March for Life next year? Perhaps your call for Catholics to not be partisan in which issues of Catholic social teaching they support would be more genuine if you led by example. Thank you all for watching. If you'd like to see more of these, please like, subscribe, and consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. Also, you can recommend articles for me to talk about on this series by sending them to me on Twitter. You can find the links below. Until next time, I'm Benedict XVII. Go with God.